March 1942. The Second World War had reached a fever pitch, spanning continents and oceans, but one of its most brutal and often overlooked theaters was about to be defined by a desperate struggle in the dense jungles and treacherous mountains of Southeast Asia. This was the China-Burma-India Theater, or CBI. It was a front where immense logistical challenges and brutal fighting were overcome by sheer tenacity, ultimately contributing significantly to the Allied victory against Japan. The root of this desperate fight lay in Japan's relentless expansion. Early in 1942, Japan had sealed China's seaports, effectively cutting off the nationalist government from vital outside supplies. China's lifeline had become a 700-mile overland route across the Himalayan plateau, known simply as the Burma Road. A remarkable feat of engineering and labor, this road had been carved out by over 200,000 Chinese laborers between 1937 and 1938, but the fall of Burma in early 1942 severed even this critical artery, rendering the existing Burma Road useless. This created an urgent need for alternative supply routes, and a strategic imperative to drive back the Japanese, who now controlled the region. American and Allied forces would face an enemy as formidable as the Imperial Japanese Army itself. The harsh environment. Daily temperatures could surpass 100 degrees Fahrenheit in May, with humidity near 100%. Dense jungles, impenetrable bamboo, steep mountainsides, biting ants, bloodthirsty bugs, thorny vines, and ubiquitous disease posed an operational challenge that would lead to immense hardship and casualties. For every Allied combat casualty, the CBI theater saw 14 soldiers evacuated, sick or dead, from disease. Into this crucible stepped General Joseph Stilwell, the commanding American officer in the CBI theater. Stilwell arrived in Burma in late February 1942, only to find a rapidly deteriorating situation. By May 6, 1942, as Japanese troops closed to within 20 miles of his retreating column, Stilwell sent his last radio message. The next day, May 7, 1942, he began an overland trek to India, choosing to walk out of Burma rather than fly. This decision, a testament to his resolve, saw him carry a Thompson submachine gun and at one point smash a primitive radio to prevent its capture. It symbolized his commitment to his men and set the stage for his subsequent command and relentless efforts to reconquer the region. The desperate situation immediately initiated perilous airlift operations over the Himalayas, a route known as the Hump, and it sparked the ambitious 1,100-mile construction project of the Ledo Road, also called the Stilwell Road, Hicks Pike, Manamile Road, or the Uncle Sam Highway. American engineer battalions began laying this road in 1942 to 1943. Over the next 27 months, this massive logistical artery would be built at approximately a mile per day. Though deemed obsolete upon its completion, the Ledo Road represented a significant logistical achievement and a symbol of Allied perseverance in one of World War II's longest active battlefronts. General Joseph Vinegar Joe Stilwell was a complex and demanding leader, possessing a deep, almost unparalleled, understanding of China. Born in Yonkers, New York, in 1883 he graduated from West Point in 1904, 32nd in a class of 124. Fluent in multiple languages, gifted in cartography and gunnery, he was a captain of the cross-country team, lettered in football, and even introduced intercollegiate basketball. The nickname Joe was adopted early in his West Point career. Despite a popular legend that his height nearly prevented his admission, Stilwell easily met the requirements, a testament to how his personality attracted stories even from a young age. Stilwell initially petitioned for the infantry, desiring combat above all else. His first assignment sent him to the Philippines, participating in anti-insurgent actions known as Plan Orange. However, his career was often marked by frustration with desk jobs and limited combat experience during World War I, where he served as a liaison with Allied armies in France and a G2 officer, spending only 6 weeks at the siege of Verdun. This contrasted sharply with his later, highly active and consequential roles. Between the wars, Stilwell had 3 significant postings in China, developing a deep language and cultural understanding. From 1935 to 1939, he served as a military attaché and the ranking colonel in China, knowing Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek personally. He earned his famous nickname, Vinegar Joe, during a 1930s stint teaching at Fort Benning, Georgia, for his acid tongue and unvarnished style. He championed quick battlefield solution tactics over classical studies, earning praise from General George Marshall as qualified for any command and a genius for instruction. He proved victorious in wargames with screwball tactics, including a Louisiana wargame in 1940, where he won a 2-week battle on the first day by outmaneuvering a larger force. He was promoted to brigadier general in 1939 and was even considered by Marshall for command of all American troops in North Africa. Yet, Stilwell's brilliance and the vast needs of China were juxtaposed with a profoundly unprepared United States military. In 1939, the USC Army numbered only 175,000 men, making it the 19th largest land force globally. Between Portugal and Bulgaria, it possessed limited supplies of weapons, artillery, and ammunition, and virtually no mechanized forces. Full-scale war games were held only every 4 years due to severe resource scarcity. This weakness stood in stark contrast to Japan's aggressive expansionism in Asia. In 1931, Japan invaded and occupied Manchuria, using the pretext of a sabotaged railroad. By 1937, it had expanded across Chinese cities and seaports, including Peking, Tientsin, Qingdao, Amoy, and Swatow. The Rape of Nanking, from December 1937 to January 1938, served as a brutal revelation of Japan's true intentions and unspeakable brutality, shattering any illusions of peaceful coexistence. During this atrocity, an estimated 300,000 Chinese perished, and the city was devastated. The fall of Shanghai and Nanking, coupled with the impending threat to Chiang Kai-shek's capital, forced a desperate reliance on overland routes. The Burma Road, a 715-mile, 2-lane track from Kunming, China, to Lashio, Burma, became China's sole remaining sea access, its very existence a symbol of China's desperate need for international support. Japan's Asia for Asians campaign, denouncing Western commerce, masking a brutal imperial ambition, was largely unchecked by the ineffective League of Nations. The global landscape was irrevocably altered by December 7, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. This fundamentally escalated the backburner war in the Pacific to equal prominence with the war in Europe, drawing the United States fully into the conflict. The attack decimated the U.S. fully into the conflict. Naval fleet with 18 ships sunk, capsized or damaged, nearly 400 aircraft lost, and almost 4,000 killed or wounded. Simultaneously, Japan invaded northern Indochina, further cutting off China's last major land route. Japan's negotiation with Britain to close the Burma Road, General Hideki Tojo's ambition to control Southeast Asia, and Japan's tripartite pact with the Axis powers in September 1940, all set the stage. The US had responded with the transfer of 50 destroyer warships to Britain and Lend-Lease agreements for material. But direct engagement was now inevitable. The initial stages of the Pacific War were characterized by swift, overwhelming Japanese victories and profound Allied disarray. This forced a desperate strategic reorientation and the assignment of the most challenging missions to under-resourced commanders like Joe Stilwell. The conflict in Burma became a microcosm of this broader Allied struggle for survival and eventual recovery. On December 8, 1941, just hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, due to the international dateline, Japanese forces bombed British-held Malaya and landed on Luzon Island in the Philippines. The island of Guam fell to Japan on December 23, 1941, followed by Hong Kong on December 25. By early January 1942, Japanese forces were invading Borneo and Thailand. General Douglas MacArthur, commanding general in the Philippines, was forced to order the evacuation of his forces after half of all American aircraft were destroyed on the ground during the initial assault. Japan's occupation of an area 3 times the size of Germany's European holdings demonstrated their formidable military capability and strategic acumen. Their forces, described as possessing limitless numbers of soldiers and weapons and being invincible, were particularly familiar with jungle fighting, a significant advantage. By mid-1942, the China theater expanded to become the China-Burma-India, or CBI, a sprawling command responsible for defending China and India, with the initial objective to keep China in the war. This theater, however, was severely limited in resources and lacked prioritization, making any command there an impossible job. On January 23, 1942, Secretary of War George Marshall, supported by Secretary of War Henry Stimson, informed Stilwell he was to go to China instead of North Africa. On February 11, 1942, Joe Stilwell left for India to take command of the CBI, stepping into a rapidly unfolding crisis. By February 23, 1942, Japanese forces were already 100 miles inside Burma's southeastern border. The Burma Road was China's last artery of outside supply. The Japanese invasion of Burma, the last unoccupied nation in Southeast Asia, directly threatened China's supply lines and India, escalating the crisis in the CBI theater. A critical turning point occurred on February 23, 1942, at the Sitang River Bridge, the sole crossing for hundreds of miles. Lieutenant Ahmed Bashir Khan, a brave soldier, was responsible for its demolition. Using backup safety fuses and electrical switches, he attempted to blow up the 650-foot bridge. However, the partial demolition still left it usable for traffic, allowing Japanese forces to advance unimpeded towards Rangoon, a critical loss for the Allies. Stilwell made his initial visit to Chiang Kai-shek on March 4, 1942, but the situation was collapsing rapidly. By March 7, 1942, Rangoon, the commercial capital of Burma, fell to the Japanese. The city's Allied Lend-Lease warehouses contained an estimated 1,200 trucks and significant quantities of food and supplies. Allied defenses crumbled, leading to widespread destruction and the displacement of an estimated 900,000 Burmese civilians who made their way north. The destruction of 5,000 oil derricks at Yengyang, the sole source of Allied gasoline and oil in Burma, further illustrated the complete collapse of Allied defenses. On March 13, 1942, Stilwell encountered Lieutenant General Sir Harold Alexander, the British general commanding the retreating forces from Rangoon. Alexander's demeanour and reaction to Stilwell's command of Chinese troops was notably dismissive, reflecting the deep inter-Allied tensions. By April 1, 1942, Stilwell's diary entry simply read, "Am I the April Fool?" His entries reveal his growing frustration and bleak assessment of the situation. Japanese forces pushed to Burma's border with China by April 20, 1942. On April 25, 1942, Alexander informed Stilwell of the British withdrawal from Burma to India. Then, on April 29, 1942, the Japanese captured Lashio, severing the vital Burma Road, marking the definitive end of Allied presence and effective command in Burma for the moment. By May 1, 1942, Stilwell learned of a train crash commandeered by Chinese General Lo Choying, which blocked a crucial evacuation route, trapping more Allied forces. It was in this moment of utter collapse that Stilwell's renowned character shone through. On May 7, 1942, he set off on foot for India, leading a diverse group on a perilous retreat. The trek's participants included Gordon Seagrave, the Doctor Signals with Fears, Cigarette, a missionary and surgeon, accompanied by 19 Burmese nurses, Jack Belden, a favoured news correspondent, 19 of Stilwell's officers, 5 enlisted men, 12 British commandos, 7 from Seagrave's ambulance team, and 13 Chinese military personnel. They rented a train of 20 mules from an opium and jade smuggler. Their daily march required a minimum of 14 miles per day due to limited food supplies. On the initial journey, they crossed the Chanye River 9 times before 10 a.m. Key individuals physically collapsed, including Fan Shui, a Burmese nurse weakened by tuberculosis, who was transported on an inflated air mattress, and Major Frank Merrill, Stilwell's aide, who also collapsed and was moved on an air mattress. A disastrous attempt to stay cool by cutting clothing led to increased vulnerability to mosquitoes and jungle leeches. The long-term ordeal ahead consisted of 2 weeks and 140 miles of impenetrable bamboo, steep mountainsides, biting ants, bloodthirsty bugs, dehydration, hunger 40 miles, muddy bivouacs, sandflies, broken packs, deserting porters, withering some, wild elephants. One was encountered on May 9, 1942. Ingrown toenails, blistered heels, food poisoning, and malaria. Stilwell's disciplined march out of Burma was characterized by strict adherence to rules and punishing luxuries, a stark contrast to the catastrophic British withdrawal. Burmese runners and hastily constructed bamboo rafts were critical for navigating the WWII River. A vital airdrop of provisions and medical supplies, including quinine for malaria and dysentery drugs, revitalized the column. They transitioned to Naga porters, described as having easy manners and ferocious looks, some wearing bearskin clothes. Near the Burma-India border, British official Tim Sharp arrived with significant support: 400 porters, live pigs, a doctor, food and whiskey. Upon their final arrival in Imphal, Stilwell famously noted to the inquiring British officer, "Not a one lost his successful, albeit difficult, walk out of Burma with no personnel losses became a rare successful amidst widespread Allied failure, boosting morale and establishing his reputation." Meanwhile, the broader British withdrawal was devastating. It was one of the most deadly in a century, with Allied forces low on water and rations, harassed by Japanese snipers and jitter parties. Strategic destruction of abandoned artillery shells and material at the Chindwin River ferry crossing via explosives was necessary. The losses were staggering: 1,200 British, Indian, and Burmese dead, over 2,000 vehicles, 110 tanks, and 40 artillery pieces left behind. General Slim, the British commander in Burma, faced his own ordeal, his beard growing white from stress, shaving with a relic of a blade. Out of 25,000 men on the British withdrawal, 13,000 were lost. The Japanese occupation of Burma, however, proved far more difficult and costly than anticipated. Japanese troop ships took almost 3 months from Japan to Rangoon, highlighting the vast distances and logistical strain. Private Atsumi Oda, an electrical engineer, was forced to manage a horse and cart, an early sign of Japan's stretched resources. The challenging Burmese terrain, soggy lowlands, steep mountains, an arid central plateau, and Himalayan foothills significantly hampered Japanese advance and occupations. The occupation tactics were brutal, described as akin to Nanking, with arbitrary executions, gang rapes, and bodies left visible. Initial encounters with tigers in the jungle were also common, with Private Sasazawa losing his life to an 8-foot tiger. This brutality, however, fueled resistance from various Burmese tribes, most notably the Kachins. These indigenous groups developed sophisticated guerrilla warfare tactics. They employed panji sticks, sharpened bamboo scantlings, hardened by flames and coated with human feces, designed to wound and infect. Their early warning systems used split bamboo that produced a loud clack audible for half a mile. The Kachins became a ghost-like force, moving through the jungle, bypassing Japanese forts and encampments, halting the Japanese northward advance at Maitkiana. The Northern Kachin levies, or NKL, emerged from this resistance, initially bolstered by limited Allied support. Allied airdrops of leaflets in English and Jingpo announced the British return. Just 2 British officers, Lieutenant Colonel Gamble and Captain Leach, arrived as the nucleus of the NKL. They initially armed themselves with spears, a few muzzle-loading shotguns that fired loads of pebbles, and the sharp steel blades of their long dars, later supplemented by double-barreled shotguns. The NKL proved effective in causing significant Japanese casualties, with reports of them being run off like scalded cats. Their chilling psychological warfare involved taking a dozen ears on a string as proof of its success. This practice deeply impacted Japanese soldiers, who believed the soul's passage to heaven depended on intact ears. Booby traps involving grenades triggered by tripwires were also common. Young Kachin spies like Agudi detailed clandestine killings of Japanese sentries. The Kachin's effective guerrilla warfare provided the Allies with a crucial foothold and disrupted Japanese plans, laying the groundwork for future offensives. This challenged the myth of a seamless Japanese conquest, illustrating the immense difficulties and unexpected resistance they encountered in Burma, highlighting their overextension and miscalculation. The North Burma campaign and the construction of the Lido Road were immense, complex undertakings driven by the strategic imperative to keep China in the war against Japan. They were born from the fall of the Burma Road, necessitating an alternative supply route, and General Stilwell's persistent efforts to re-engage in Burma and reopen supply lines. President Roosevelt's commitment to supporting China through Lend-Lease and air transport also played a crucial role. The Ledo Road was envisioned as a 478-mile, all-weather track of gravel, 30 feet wide and 4 inches thick. The undertaking required crossing vertical rainforests with up to 150 inches of rain in just 3 summer months. Mountains rose as high as 3,800 feet at the India-Burma border. The project necessitated 700 bridges and 7 to 13 rain culverts per mile. The estimated labor force included 17,000 American engineer troops overseeing an estimated 50,000 to 80,000 laborers. At the Quadrant Conference in Quebec, the decision was made to also build 4 and eventually 6 oil and gas pipelines alongside the road. Winston Churchill, however, dismissed the project as an immense, laborious task, unlikely to be finished before the need for it had passed. American Colonel Charles Glame called it the toughest engineering job on the planet. Parallel to this ground effort, air power would prove critical. Clearly, Chenault, a former Army Air Corps officer retired for medical reasons, partial deafness, and chronic bronchitis emerged as a pivotal figure. He formed the American Volunteer Group, or AVG, better known as the Flying Tigers. They flew aging P-40 fighters, purchased from the Americans after British Lend-Lease deemed them obsolete. The distinctive shark-tooth markings painted on their P-40s became an iconic image. The Flying Tigers made their debut engagement on December 20, 1941, against 10 Japanese Mitsubishi bombers near Kunming. AVG pilots used wing cannons and 4.30 caliber guns blazing. Pilot Fritz Wolf knocked down 2 Mitsus, expending 1,465 rounds of ammunition. Over 7 months, the AVG claimed 299 Japanese aircraft, with 153 more probable kills, demonstrating that Japanese air superiority could be challenged. They innovated constantly, using scavenged parts for P-40s and chewing gum and adhesive tape to fill bullet holes. Propellers were painted new colors every week to deceive the enemy. Pilots even created incendiary gifts of gasoline-filled whiskey bottles to drop from cockpits. Radio Tokyo, in response, labeled the pilots as unprincipled bandits and warned they would be treated as guerrillas. Chenault's success led to his subsequent promotion to brigadier general and command of the 23rd Fighter Group. The Doolittle Raid, though a morale boost for the Allies, had a devastating aftermath in China. Japanese retaliation killed more than 250,000 civilians and destroyed Chinese airfields, further complicating the strategic situation. The CBI theater was a fabulous compound of logistics, personalities, communism, despotism, corruption, imperialism, nonsense, and tragic impotence. General Stilwell's struggles with jaundice were often said to mirror the condition of his theater of operations. Given the prolonged delay in land route completion, the Air Transport Command, or ATC, was established to ferry supplies over the Himalayan hump. The promise was for 100 new C-46 cargo planes to carry 12,000 tons of goods a month. The C-46 had a payload capacity of nearly 8 tons and an operating altitude higher than the C-47's 24,000-foot maximum ceiling. However, older C-47s and refitted B-24 Liberators, C-87s/C-109s, were often used as substitutes. The perilous 500 miles by air over the hump route presented immense challenges: unreliable maps, limited radio range 30 to 50 miles, Japanese fighter aircraft, ground fire, dubbed Black Roses, and monsoons with freak winds to 248 miles per hour. Lineman described tightening seat harnesses to withstand the extreme turbulence. The CBI theater was severely hampered by a confluence of logistical failures, interallied strategic disagreements, and internal political instability, ultimately leading to a prolonged and costly struggle against the Japanese. By the summer and fall of 1942, only 100 tons were being delivered of a promised 5,000 tons a month to Kunming. This logistical nightmare over the hump airlift route was plagued by extreme turbulence, downdrafts, and updrafts, causing severe physical strain on crews. Pilots reported their hands could pass between their legs and harnesses, and aircraft could tilt to 90 degrees or more. QC-40 and faulty defrosters causing ice buildup. One infamous C-46 was dubbed the Leakin' Deacon due to hydraulic fluid issues. Nearly 600 planes would crash along the route by the war's end, with an average of 80 TC planes going down a month. This drastically limited supply delivery to China, impacting Allied operations and morale Divergent priorities among the Allies dashed the US, Britain, and China led to the misallocation of resources and conflicting operational plans. This was exemplified by the stalled Anakim invasion of Burma. General Wavell, the British commander in India, was initially skeptical of the plan. By early December 1942, the British informed Stilwell they lacked the naval force to control the Bay of Bengal. This, combined with Chiang Kai-shek's withdrawal of support, forced the cancellation of Anakim, a significant setback that required a strategic reassessment. Chiang Kai-shek's pragmatism and demands were a constant source of friction. In June 1942, Chiang presented Stilwell with a three-point ultimatum threatening to liquidate the China theater, forcing Allied leadership to confront the critical importance of CBI and the need to placate China. On August 1, 1942, Chiang agreed to the invasion contingent on British cooperation. However, he was increasingly swayed by Claire Chennault's air power doctrine, which offered a compelling, albeit potentially oversimplified alternative to ground operations. Chennault wrote to President Roosevelt on October 8, 1942, claiming that 105 modern fighter aircraft plus 30 medium and 12 heavy bombers could achieve the downfall of Japan within 6 months, within 1 year at the outside. On March 1943, Roosevelt established the 14th Air Force under Chennault, legitimizing his air power strategy and shifting the focus of American efforts in the region. Adding to the complexity, internal Indian unrest erupted with Mohandas Gandhi's call for independence and a subsequent civil disobedience campaign. This disrupted critical supply lines and infrastructure within India, further exacerbating logistical challenges. The Arakan disaster, an ill-fated British invasion of Burma's Arakan division from December 1942 to March 1943, involved about 6,000 men in 9 brigades. This campaign exposed the inadequacy of existing Allied plans and tactics against Japanese defenses, made of heavy logs covered by several feet of earth, were almost invisible and heavily stocked with ammunition and provisions. Japanese forces also used high-velocity, armor-penetrating anti-tank weapons, highlighting the need for a radical shift in strategy. By March 1943, General Wavell committed to Ordwingate's unconventional tactics, signaling a move towards more adaptable and aggressive operations in Burma. Ordwingate was a highly unconventional, often self-destructive, but ultimately visionary military leader. His unique blend of intellect, idealism, and ruthless pragmatism forged transformative guerrilla warfare tactics that challenged established military doctrine and profoundly impacted conflict in the Middle East and Asia. Wingate's early life revealed a non-conformist mindset. At Woolwich, he defiantly adhered to his own moral authority over military custom, standing nude and walking a gauntlet without flinching during a courtyard punishment. Thinking fueled his later idealism. In the Sudan, he presided over 275 men and their families, functioning as a regional chieftain. Using fox hunting skills, he halted Ethiopian ivory traders, but it was witnessing the death of an undernourished old man, shot for ivory poaching at Wingate's order in April 1931, that caused him immediate revulsion and spiritual vertigo. This deep-seated guilt and anger against oppression shaped his later idealism and commitment to fighting for the marginalized. His brazen, protocol-breaking confrontation with General Sir Cyril Deverell, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, to gain entry to the Staff College, illustrated his relentless ambition. In 1936, Wingate was assigned as a captain on the Army's intelligence staff in Palestine. The political instability there, with an Arab revolt against Zionist settlement, provided him with a cause and an opportunity to apply his developing tactical ideas. This led to the formation of the Special Night Squads, or SNS. These Wingate-trained units evolved from defensive stands to ambushes and attacks, described as perhaps the world's best elite force by a year into their operation. Their tactics involved marching 15 miles through desert at night, bayonets sheathed in black cotton, and the use of newfangled radio communication. By late 1938, the SNS was decimating Palestinian Arabs and schooling future Israeli generals like Moshe Dayan. However, they also engaged in abuse, forcing captives to eat oil-soaked sand and executing 3 rebel suspects without trial in the village of Sila el-Daher. Wingate's eccentricities were legendary: an unkempt beard, unwashed clothing, a Wolseley pith helmet, wearing a large alarm clock on a string, bathing with a hard rubber brush, eating only raw onions, and conducting meetings naked while scrubbing himself. His professional exile and personal crisis followed with the disbandment of the SNS and his recall to England. In July 1941, in his Cairo hotel room, Wingate attempted suicide by slashing his throat with a knife. This period tested his resilience and foreshadowed his later struggles for recognition. The escalating conflict in East Africa and North Africa, following Italy's entry into World War II, created a desperate need for unconventional solutions. Wingate was recalled for the Gideon Force campaign in Ethiopia. Named after an Old Testament warrior, his army comprised 1,600 Sudanese and Ethiopian troops, utilizing camels and mules for transport in northeastern Ethiopia. Near the Sharaka River, Gideon Force destroyed Italian armored vehicles and shot down a Savoia bomber, resulting in over 140 Italian casualties. Haile Selassie returned to Addis Ababa by May 5, 1941, with over 14,000 Italians taken prisoner. Yet, upon returning to British Middle East headquarters in Cairo, Wingate, a victorious colonel, was demoted to major. The Japanese invasion of Burma and the desperate Allied situation necessitated the development of a new form of long-range penetration warfare. Wingate, promoted to brigadier, was given command of the 77th Indian Infantry Brigade, 3,000 British, Indian Gurkha and Burmese soldiers for long-range penetration warfare, the Chindits. Their training emphasized marching to stop malaria, forbidding shaving, cutting trails through jungles, and using over 1,000 mules for transport and food. The Chindit training philosophy involved foraging for meals, frogs, fish, bugs, birds, lizards, shakapura biscuits, enduring dysentery, and hospitalization with minimal medical support. Wingate railed against prevailing hypochondria, and their motto became, "Peace at any fucking price." Their tactics included collective organism warfare, secret jungle rendezvous points, and hand-to-hand combat techniques like ear-biting, eye-going, and testicle kicking. Wingate earned nicknames like Tarzan and Brigadier Bela Lugosi. Their slogan was from Ecclesiastes, "Whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might." The Chindit operations in Burma, particularly the first Operation Longcloth from February 13–17, 1943, were presented as a propaganda triumph and a bold innovation. Yet, they were ultimately a costly and strategically questionable endeavor that bled Allied resources and manpower for limited tangible gains. Though they significantly impacted British military thinking, Operation Longcloth involved Southern, Diversionary, and Northern, Main Thrust groups. On March 2nd, one of the Southern Group's command columns was ambushed near Kiaikithan, with only 74 soldiers and officers surviving. However, March 6, 1943 was a day of coordinated Chindit successes. Column No. 5 and Column No. 3 disrupted the Mandalay-Myitkyina Railway at dozens of spots and blew up multiple bridges, a significant tactical achievement. Brigadier Wingate was ecstatic and thrilled by these early successes, which demonstrated the tactical potential of the Chindit operations and fueled his ambition. The Chindits, however, were plagued by problems. Maps were horribly inaccurate, causing columns to repeatedly find villages abandoned, leading to wasted effort and misdirection exacerbated by the slash-and-burn techniques of Burmese farmers, which frequently moved agricultural villages. The loss of communication was a recurring and devastating problem. Major Conran was removed from command for turning off his radio. Illustrating the critical importance of communication, Lieutenant Stuart Jones, lost and disoriented, eventually emerged with only 4 Gurkha riflemen, highlighting the severe consequences of being cut off. The perilous crossing of the Irrawaddy River marked a crucial transition into deeper, more dangerous Japanese-held territory, pushing the Chindits to their limits. On March 11, 1943, Wingate received a signal that Southern Group troops had crossed the Irrawaddy, confirming his decision to push deeper into Japanese territory, a strategic choice that significantly increased risks and casualties. On March 13, 1943, Mike Calvert, Mad Mike, a highly capable and trusted subordinate, faced intense combat while crossing the Irrawaddy, leading to the ultimate sacrifice of abandoning 12 casualties on an island, with nearly 2,000 men, or 2 full Japanese divisions, actively searching for the Chindit columns east of the Irrawaddy. the situation became untenable. On March 23, 1943, Wingate ordered Calvert to cancel his approach on Gok Take and return to India, signaling the beginning of the withdrawal. On April 7, 1943, Wingate gave orders for his group to move again after a week-long hideout, leading to their eventual return to India. The last Chindit group, a 9-man party from Wingate's Column 1, exited Burma on June 6, 1943. The operation resulted in a staggering casualty rate. Out of 3,000 Chindits, only 2,182 came out, with just 600 fit for service. The estimated 205 Japanese killed was a starkly low number compared to Allied losses, leading General William Slim to provide a stark, realistic assessment of the operation's failure in terms of casualties and tangible gains, contrasting sharply with the propaganda. While the propaganda hailed the Chindits as heroes, creating a vital morale boost for the Allied war effort, the reality was a costly operation with high casualties and questionable strategic return on investment. However, Wingate's long-range penetration concept, despite its operational shortcomings, deeply impressed Prime Minister Churchill, who saw him as a symbol of innovation. Churchill championed Wingate's plan and proposed the creation of Southeast Asia Command, or CEC, under Lord Louis Mountbatten. General Marshall even offered US STRI troops for Wingate's operation, marking the first American battlefield forces in the CBI theater. The first Wingate operations laid the groundwork for future, more organized and resourced LRP operations, altering the thinking of senior military leaders. While the Chindits operated, another brutal testament to Japanese imperial ambition was taking shape: the construction of the Burma-Siam Railway. By May 1942, Japan had lost 67 ships, plus 314 tons of goods, sunk while en route to Rangoon. The Quadrant Conference had planned a multi-pronged invasion of Burma, but Japan's need for secure land routes to supply occupied Burma, bypassing Allied naval blockades, led to the accelerated construction of this railway. Japan decided in March 1942 to accelerate the Burma-Siam Railway construction from an 18-month to a 1-year plan, connecting a 260-mile zone through the jungles and mountains of west-central Siam, Thailand, and into eastern Burma. The British pre-war colonial infrastructure provided a partial foundation, but the critical gap required immense, forced labor. Japanese imperial ideology of superiority fueled their drive to beat Westerners into submission and utilize captured populations as disposable labor. This construction project, which became known as the Death Railway, was completed in October 1943. It came at an appalling human cost: over 16,000 Allied prisoners and as many as 150,000 Thai, Burmese, Indonesian, and Malaysian conscript laborers perished during its 17-month construction. The fictionalized portrayal of the railway in Pierre Boulez's 1952 novel, The Bridge on the River Kwai, and its 1957 film adaptation, tragically overshadows the horrific reality of forced labor and overwhelming death for POA and conscripts. The romanticized narrative of heroism and self-respect stands in stark contrast to the brutal, life-ending reality. British Second Lieutenant Geoffrey Farrow Adams' first-hand account details the inhumane journey and brutal labor. POWs troweled in sluggish trains, in boxcars, 40 feet long by 8 feet wide, designed to hold 30 people with no room to sit or lie down. Japanese reliance on old-style building techniques, like stone-weighted pile drivers that would employ elephants, ropes, and pulleys due to a lack of heavy machinery, added to the human toll. Sergeant Major Saito, director of the Tamakan POW camp, issued harsh orders. Lieutenant Fuji, chief engineer at Tamafarm, embodied arbitrary cruelty through his samurai sword threats and physical assaults on POWs. Like Adams, by late 1942, the bridge superstructure was nearly halfway across the river. Then, a significant flood washed out months of work, forcing a complete restart. The execution of 2 escaped POWs from Changi, Singapore, solidified the extreme consequences of disobedience. TODs adopted coping mechanisms like atapat staring, mentally escaping while gazing at the palm leaf roofs. Some Japanese guards like Okamoto, a Hawaiian-born, American-educated Korean designated a good guard, provided controlled empathy and news. Kaneshiro, the undertaker, another Korean guard, even befriended POWs, demonstrating complex human dynamics, but was brutally punished for minor infractions. Primitive isolation boxes, cells of galvanized tin, barely large enough for a man to stand inside and bucket torture, using a 5 or 6 gallon bucket filled with water or stones, were used to inflict prolonged agony. Despite the suffering, by early 1943, the first train crossed the newly completed wooden rail bridge over the WWII. This early February 1943 journey signaled a functional, albeit temporary, completion of the railway line. However, for the next 11 months, continued labor, malaria, malnutrition, and a cholera epidemic ravaged the camps. This generated the shared profound trauma and a sense of enduring camaraderie among those who survived. Meanwhile, the Hump airlift, a perilous 500 miles by air over the Himalayas, was delivering 3,000 tons a month to Kunming by June 1943, a significant increase from just 106 tons the previous June. Hundreds of aircraft made the Hump crossing daily, though over 1,000 Hump flyers were listed as crashed or missing by the end of the airlift in 1945. C-46 aircraft engines were still prone to the vapor locks that plagued their design. Limited radio range, about a 30-mile radius, and the absence of radar contributed to mid-air collisions. The overwhelming danger and constant strain created a chaotic yet exhilarating environment that bonded aircrews, despite the privations. On August 2, 1943, Eric Severade, a print and CBS radio correspondent, was a passenger on a C-46 that suffered engine failure over Burma. This incident vividly illustrated the perilous and disorienting nature of wartime survival, the unexpected resilience of individuals, and the complex web of military and political relationships in the CBI theater. The C-46's left engine ceased to work. Crew Chief Sergeant Ned Miller began jettisoning baggage from the plane. The situation shifted quickly from a mechanical issue to an evacuation. Passengers began to jump. John Davies jumped frog-like, followed by Duncan Lee. Then, the plane suddenly lurched and dove, forcing Severade to jump, despite his reservations and the dangerous proximity of a mountain peak directly beneath the plane. The pilot, Harry Neveu, struggled to maintain control. Severade's parachute tangled in treetops, leaving him suspended. Radio operator Walter Oswald, who had courageously stayed to call off their position, had likely broken his ankle. Pilot Neveu had a broken rib. Their survival pouches attached to their parachutes were missing critical items: knives, rations, mosquito nets, and first aid boxes. They found themselves in a muddy river between two mountains, near a small village of grass huts. A twin-engine Douglas transport plane circled above, dropping a wrapped bale of survival goods by parachute. It contained an axe, jungle knives, 2 blankets, canned rations, mosquito netting, cigarettes, and 2 Springfield rifles, one with a broken stock. A small grey sack held a typewritten note with their location: 26 DG, 25 north latitude, to 95 DG, 20 east longitude. A second bale contained a radio set. Then, squat coffee-brown native men appeared, carrying long spears and long metal dars. They were the Naga tribe, initially feared by the survivors as headhunters, but these tribal members proved helpful, sharing gourds of strong alcohol and aiding in recovering a lost bale. Dr. Flickinger, the surgeon, who became the leader of the stranded group, even opened a clinic for the Nagas. A Naga named Mongson gave Dr. Trianomites, Flickinger an ornate wooden crossbow with ivory inlays. This unexpected alliance challenged pre-existing fears and stereotypes. Philip Adams, an Englishman and the Sahib of Mokokchung, fluent in the Naga language, arrived on August 14, 3 days after the crash. He provided crucial context about the local threat, informing them of Ponyo village, known for skull-taking raids. Adams was instrumental in organizing their rescue. The personal drama of Severade's survivor played out against a backdrop of immense strategic confusion and command challenges that plagued the CBI theater. While Allies landed in Italy on September 3, 1943, and gained traction in Europe and the Pacific throughout the summer of 1943, the CBI theater seemed stalled. In September 1943, changes in CBI command were underway, with Stilwell under renewed pressure. Chiang Kai-shek repeatedly demanded Stilwell's recall, but General George Marshall continued to support Stilwell. General Wavell was replaced by General Sir Claude Auchinleck. The Orc, Lord Louis Mountbatten, became the new CCC commander. TV. Sung Chiang Kai-shek's foreign minister arrived in Washington by the end of September 1943 to voice Chinese demands. These political infighting and competing agendas created instability and hindered strategic progress. 22 days after the crash, the group reached Mokokchung, 85 ground miles or 60 air miles from their crash site. The Calcutta Statesman arrived on August 13th, bringing news from the outside world. Messages about fried chicken and ice cream spurred their final push. In early autumn of 1943, Severade flew to Kunming. His harrowing experience was a microcosm of the daily risks borne by those operating the Hump air route and maintaining the Ledo supply lines, all through the unforgiving Patkai Range, separating India from Burma. The CBI theatre remained plagued by strategic indecision, inter-allied friction, and immense logistical challenges. However, it would ultimately see progress driven by General Joseph W. Stilwell's tenacious leadership and the crucial development of the Ledo Road, enabling a renewed push against Japanese forces in Burma. Chiang Kai-shek's hesitation to commit his troops was rooted in a deep distrust of his own commanders, fears of American control over Lend-Lease aid, and a general skepticism of China's military readiness. This, combined with inter-allied tensions, especially between Mountbatten and Stilwell, and differing priorities, Britain's focus on defending England versus fighting in Asia hampered strategic cohesion. Japanese overland assaults were aimed at crippling Chennault's air power, forcing the Allies to address threats to forward bases. The vast distances, difficult terrain, and limited infrastructure in CBI presented immense obstacles to supplying troops and equipment. The Hump airlift, while initially sputtering, was improving, delivering over 13,000 tons in December 1943. A pivotal turning point occurred on October 15, 1943, with Lord Mountbatten's arrival in Chungking. Mountbatten's diplomatic maneuvering, leveraging Lend-Lease and even offering a Cartier compact as a gift for Madame Chiang, secured Stilwell's position, preventing a critical leadership void. Mountbatten, with the diplomatic skill of a master, had found and taken control of Chiang's greatest weakness. The subtext of Mountbatten's message was simple: to have Chiang's nationalist Chinese forces go unused would imperil all flow of Lend-Lease goods. This intervention ultimately led Chiang to grant full command to Stilwell of the Chinese X-Force, empowering Stilwell to implement his operational plans without further political obstruction. The Ledo Road construction under the leadership of General Louis Pick, designer of the Missouri River Dam system, was gaining momentum. By November 1943, Ledo Road construction had crossed into North Burma at Pangsau Pass, laying roadbed at a rate of 3/4 of a mile per day, extending 70 miles into Burma. This revival of the Ledo Road provided a tangible supply line and a strategic pathway into Burma. Indian artisans also built mud and brick kilns to pave sections of the Tidham Road. Stilwell, who had been described as having the diplomatic skill of a master, found his China-based Y-Force still horribly inadequate. They had outmoded weapons, tattered uniforms, and were underfed, sick. He was often snared in the dark and vituperative side of his personality when it came to Chennault, blocking Chennault's pleas to Washington for aircraft. The strategic debate in Washington acknowledged that the China-Burma-India theater and the land route to Japan was proving far too slow in coalescing, while the island-hopping approach across the Pacific was proceeding quickly. Nevertheless, Stilwell's relentless drive was undeterred. His diary entries revealed his frustrations with Chiang Kai-shek's inaction and his determination to push forward, referring to himself with self-deprecation as the deckhand or the lowly Chinese troop commander. His body, afflicted with jaundice, mirrored the stress of his command. He exchanged his flat-brimmed World War I hat for a steel infantry helmet, actively participating at the front lines, even sleeping in a dirt dugout. His succinct battle plan was, "We have to go in through a rat hole and dig the hole as we go." By December 24, 1943, the Chinese X-Force, 33,000 men strong with Stilwell present, attacked and took Yupbang Ga, a village where the first significant battle had taken 3 days to capture. This early victory for the Chinese X-Force was a crucial confidence booster, proving their capability against seasoned Japanese troops and marking a significant step in Stilwell's campaign. Stilwell observed that the Chinese were full of beans and tickled to death at beating the Japs. Provisions were dropped from cargo planes, with rice hurtling to earth in double burlap sacks. The Japanese 18th Division, a battle-tested enemy force, was off balance and in a full defensive posture, expecting the full brunt of Stilwell's X-Force. By January 1st, 1944, Chiang committed one-third of his Y-Force to invade northern Burma. However, the Burma campaign was still brutal. Colonel Nevin Wetzel described the horrors of the Burma jungle, the bones and skulls of thousands of refugees, mouldered on the leafy ground. He also recounted the dangers of naga sores, ulcers caused by festering leech heads left embedded in the skin, and that the leaves did not move, only the leeches. In February 1944, Stilwell and Chinese forces approached Mingtuan, the next Japanese stronghold, defended by Lieutenant General Shinichi Tanaka. Stilwell's diary entry on February 8, 1944, was optimistic, chewing them up in bunches. But by mid-February 1944, he was frustrated, searching for the misplaced Chinese 66th Regiment. It was time to deploy a few of the screwball ideas that had made Joe Stilwell America's most successful wargame commander. Unconventional guerrilla warfare tactics and forces, spearheaded by the OSS's Detachment 101 and later Merrill's Marauders, were crucial to Allied success in the Burma campaign. They provided vital intelligence, disrupted enemy supply lines, and directly engaged Japanese forces in ways conventional armies could not. General Stilwell's anger and desire to continue fighting in Burma after the 1942 walkout led to his proposal to General William Wild Bill Donovan, director of the OSS, for a guerrilla war. Donovan encouraged the plan, and OSS Detachment 101 was established under Military of Muspian Presates and Bayer Goodfellow, a Brooklyn newspaperman turned advisor, and Major Eifler. Stilwell's famously gruff initial greeting to Major Eifler was, "I didn't send for you, and I don't want you." The need for intelligence and sabotage behind enemy lines drove the creation of these specialized units, as the ineffectiveness of conventional approaches in the dense Burmese jungle necessitated the adoption of guerrilla tactics. Detachment 101 operatives were trained by masquerading as malaria researchers. Their initial combat jump, by a group led by Captain Jack Barner on January 27, 1943, preceded Wingate's Chindits. They used Composition C, a light and malleable plastic explosive, for demolitions, and carried L-pills, potassium cyanide capsules, for suicide, to avoid capture. This first raid proved the viability of their mission. Detachment 101 was responsible for destroying 57 bridges, derailing 9 trains, recovering over 400 Allied flyers, inflicting over 5,400 Japanese casualties, and destroying over 15,000 tons of Japanese supplies and equipment. An astonishing 85% of intelligence going to Stilwell for his X-Force originated from Detachment 101. They also effectively used the Jungle Grapevine, a word-of-mouth communication system, to spread information and organize local forces. Tragically, the disastrous O Group mission in March 1943 to rescue a downed hump pilot resulted in the loss of the entire team, including mission commander Captain Ray Pears, who later became Detachment 101's operations officer. However, the recruitment and training of thousands of Kachin Rangers by Detachment 101 significantly amplified its operational capacity and intelligence gathering. OSS Kachins rescued an airman, a dramatic example of indigenous assistance and their specialized skills. Captain Wilkinson's unit alone had over 700 Kachins. Lieutenant Vincent Curl's force, united with Jingtor Now, numbered over 500 guerrillas. At its peak, a maximum of 120 Americans were in Detachment 101 at any one time. Meanwhile, President Roosevelt's call for volunteers for dangerous and hazardous missions and General Marshall's promise to Wingate led to the formation of the Galahad Unit. This 5,307th Composite Unit, provisional, better known as Marauders, comprised 3,000 volunteers, divided into 3 1,000-man battalions. They arrived and began training in January 1944. Despite Wingate's fury, the command of the Galahad Unit was transferred to Stilwell in December 1943, positioning them as a key component of the North Burma campaign. Brigadier General Frank Merrill was their commander. Merrill's Marauders adopted tactics suited to the brutal jungle environment. They wore solid, dark jungle clothing for enhanced concealment. They utilized panjis, improvised spike traps used by Kachins and Americans against Japanese soldiers. Booby trap trails with tripwires and crossbows were set for ambushes. Small spike mines with .30 caliber rifle cartridges on pressure detonators were designed to fire upwards when stepped on. Pack mules were essential for carrying heavy equipment, but prone to panicking near wild animals. Naga sores, ulcers caused by festering leech heads left embedded in the skin, were a common affliction. Stilwell and Merrill hashed out plans on a dirt map, a visual representation of their unconventional and direct approach to strategy. On February 7, 1944, Merrill's Marauders began their march south towards Japanese-occupied Burma. Their initial skirmishes marked their entry into direct combat. On February 25, 1944, Private Robert Landis became the first Marauder casualty, killed by machine gun fire, and Corporal Warner Katz sustained the first combat wound. On March 4, 1944, Merrill's Marauders were scheduled to attack Walawbum, but skirmishes alerted the Japanese. This date became the actual day of the first major clash between Merrill's Marauders and General Shinichi Tanaka's resourceful Japanese 18th Division. The determination and tactical adaptability of American Marauder forces, coupled with significant logistical disadvantages faced by the Japanese, led to a crucial turning point in the Burma campaign, ultimately weakening Japanese control and paving the way for Allied advances. The battle for Walawbum was jungle warfare at its most brutal. General Tanaka's Japanese 18th Division launched relentless grenade launcher fire and kamikaze-style charges against fortified American positions. A small 30-man Marauder I and R platoon, faced with a Japanese regiment, formed a defensive square, engaging in savage melee and bloody hand-to-hand fighting, creating a truly terrifying cacophony. The use of Nisei interpreters proved critical. They listened to Japanese radio communications, translating the command "Go for their stomachs," revealing a vulnerable Allied point. The crucial intervention of 81mm mortars from the 3rd Battalion across the river slowed Japanese advances. Sergeant Roy Matsumoto, a Nisei marauder and interpreter, intercepted a Japanese radio message from Sergeant Akira Iwataki on March 3, 1944. Matsumoto's intercept on March 5, 1944, revealed orders for a division-wide withdrawal and critical shortages of ammunition and food for Tanaka's forces. This confirmed the success of Allied pressure and provided vital intelligence that the Japanese 18th Division was spread extremely thin. General Stilwell, who was present and concerned for his marauders, issued aggressive advance orders on March 7, 1944. By mid-March 1944, Walawbum was secured. The marauders employed feints and flanking maneuvers, bypassing strongholds like Maengkwan. On March 28, 1944, the Japanese command issued a retreat order for their ammunition depot at Tingkork-Sakan, confirming their dire situation. The marauders' success secured the strategic advantage needed for the Allied advance down the Burma Road. They captured the Mogong Valley and the Kamaing Road, effectively severing Japanese supply lines. The arrival of Chinese X-Force troops signaled the consolidations of Allied gains and the effective expulsion of the Japanese 18th Division from the upper Hukong Valley. This significantly degraded the fighting capability and morale of the once feared Japanese 18th Division. The CBI theater, once dismissed and forgotten, was proving that determination combined with innovative tactics and critical intelligence gathering could overcome immense challenges. The heroism of those who served in Burma, from the builders of the Lado Road, to the pilots of the Hump, to the disciplined marauders and the resilient Kachin Rangers, was instrumental. Their tenacity against a brutal enemy and an unforgiving land ultimately contributed to the final victory in the global conflict. But the story was far from over. Early in 1944, the campaign intensified. General Stilwell, an Allied commander focused on demonstrating X-Force's capability, pushed his troops further. He aimed to exploit every Japanese weakness. The formidable Japanese 18th Division, once the vanquisher of Singapore, Malaya, and Burma, was now spread far too thin across the jungle. Their lines were stretched. Their vital supply depots, sometimes guarded by only 3 men, were vulnerable. A critical confrontation loomed at Walawbum. On March 5, 1944, the dense jungle erupted. This was a day of intense fighting, marked by 6 relentless banzai charges. The Marauders' Orange Combat Team, a mere 250 men, faced an overwhelming force of 5,000 attackers at Walawbum. The odds were staggering. Yet, the Americans held. Their Browning automatic rifles and heavy machine guns created devastating kill zones. Crucial fire support came from the 3rd Battalion, unleashing 81mm mortars, putting mortar rounds in our pockets, soldiers would later say. Real-time battlefield intelligence was paramount. Henry Horizontal Hank Gosho, a Nisei interpreter, lay on his belly, listening intently. He intercepted vital enemy orders. Sergeant Roy A. Matsumoto, another Nisei interpreter, monitored Japanese radio communications. He did so from a precarious tree limb, often dodging sniper fire. The Japanese communication lines themselves, running through treetops, were unknowingly vulnerable to this interception. The desperate Japanese radio calls echoed through the static. Casualties very large, we cannot protect river crossing. Then, cannot hold much longer, if help does not come. After one particularly brutal assault at Walawbum, 350 Japanese dead were tallied on both sides of the river. The distinct American countercry of "fuck you" met the Japanese charges. By March 6, 1944, the Japanese withdrew from Walawbum, but not for long. Intense shelling followed, then a renewed Japanese assault. The Marauders in 5 days at Walawbum suffered 8 killed and 37 wounded. In stark contrast, 800 enemy were killed. Japanese losses were estimated at 25 times that of the Americans. This was a brutal cost. 3 days later, on March 9, 1944, the Chinese X-Force arrived at Walawbum. Their symbolic arrival, with mess porters who carried a veritable kitchen divided into 2 loads, slung on either end of a pole, solidified Allied control. The road ahead remained perilous. General Merrill, commander of the Marauders, reported these key events to Stilwell. On March 12, 1944, Stilwell ordered the Marauders on their second mission, pushing south, deeper into Burma. Lieutenant James L. Tilley, an OSS officer, led the resilient Kachin Rangers. They were crucial, aiding Marauder operations, the distinct Japanese boot prints in the mud, showing their jungle boots with split soles designed for toe movement, were a constant reminder of the unseen enemy. Allied power was growing. By early 1944, the disparity in resources was stark. 4 tons of supplies per Allied soldier versus just 2 pounds per Japanese soldier. Allied armament spending soared. In the US, it rose from $40.50 billion in 1941 to a colossal $378 billion in 1944. Britain's armament spending doubled. From $50 billion to $100 billion, the Allies also enjoyed an advantage in artillery shell sizes, though the Japanese used 50mm K mortars and even 150mm howitzer shells. The strategic impact of Allied air power was immense. The Marauders pressed on. Their I and R platoon, often moving in a 3-pointed star formation, spearheaded reconnaissance. On March 19, 1944, Lieutenant 44, Colonel William Osborne, 1st Battalion Commander, discovered a strategic roadblock location near Shaduzup. This was crucial for the Kamaming Road. In the early morning, shortly after March 1944, the battle for the Kamaming Road and Shaduzup commenced. Roughly 300 Japanese troops were in Shaduzup proper, with more scattered north. A single burst from a machine gun could kill over 60 Japanese soldiers in one engagement. The American tactic often involved initial assaults in Shaduzup with unloaded rifles and fixed bayonets. Troops advanced under fire, using the National Guard crouch. Taunts were exchanged in the brutal close quarters. Tojo eats shit, met with Eleanor eats powdered eggs. Even in the K ration boxes, the unchewably waxy substitute gum was a small reminder of home in a foreign hell. The CBI theatre demanded everything. It was a hell of brush typhus and relentless malaria. Dysentery and cholera tore through ranks, debilitating men. Leeches clung stubbornly, and jungle rot was an ever-present threat. The human toll of jungle warfare was immense. This theater was crucial in tying down significant Japanese forces. This prevented their deployment elsewhere, contributing profoundly to overall Allied victory. Far from a sideshow, this was a vital front. Yet, strategic disagreements simmered beneath the surface of Allied cooperation. General Joseph Warren Vinegar Joe Stilwell, commander of the CBI, faced monumental tasks. His relationship with Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek was fraught with tension. Stilwell's strategic vision often clashed with Chinese political maneuvering. This challenges simplistic narratives of Allied unity. The supply lines were a nightmare, highlighted by Stilwell's May 1942 retreat from Burma. Reopening a vital route to China was paramount. The Hump airlift became the critical artery across the Himalayas. C-46, C-47s, C-87s, C-87s, and C-109s flew dangerous missions over impassable terrain. General Henry Harley Hap Arnold, commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces, oversaw this aerial lifeline. Simultaneously, a monumental engineering feat began, the Lado Road. Its construction from Xinghuayang through the Pangzhou Pass was relentless. This was the strategic imperative to keep China in the war. By early 1943, the Lido Road opened for convoy traffic. PIC's first convoy marked a turning point in logistical achievement. This re-established a vital supply line, bolstering China's resistance against Japan. Unconventional warfare defined many operations. Orde Wingate led his Chindits in innovative long-range jungle penetrations. Major General Frank Merrill commanded Merrill's Marauders, the 5,307th Composite Unit. They employed daring tactics like glider insertions and established the Broadway landing strip. Detachment 101, an OSS unit under Major General Carl Eifler, operated behind enemy lines. Nisei interpreters were vital for intelligence gathering and communication. Air power was paramount, as championed by Claire Lee Chennault. His Flying Tigers and later the 14th Air Force played a key role. B-24 Liberator bombers provided crucial support for ground operations. Local ethnic groups, like the Kachins and Nagas, offered invaluable aid. Their experiences provide a complex humanized perspective on the war. The 1944 to 1945 North Burma campaign from Maikikina to Mandalay was brutal. This period saw the Japanese Ichigo campaign across East China unfold simultaneously. The battle for Imphal and Kohima raged in 1944, a desperate Japanese offensive. The CBI campaigns highlighted immense logistical challenges and human toll. This led to advancements in tactics and medical care. This theater demonstrated the importance of air power and unconventional warfare. The conflict was often overlooked by broader historical narratives. Its profound significance in the overall Allied victory cannot be overstated.